So, hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm TJ Haines at The Forge. Go, Patrick. That's your cue.
Oh, I'm Patrick Abbott. I'm a sci-fi author, and it's a pleasure to say for the first time, a longtime listener, first-time caller.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Um, and today we're talking about aliens and whether they exist, why we think so. There's no right or wrong. This is something Patrick and I have exchanged about in the past. It got resurrected recently with Barack Obama saying he believes aliens exist, but then saying he hasn't seen any evidence of it. And then President Donald Trump saying he was going to again authorize the release of additional material, what the government does and I guess doesn't know, which I'll bet the doesn't know part is longer than the knows part. And Patrick writes sci-fi and stuff. In a second, Patrick, I'm going to ask you to talk about what you do because I'm only half aware, and I think the people would like to know where you're coming from too. So Patrick and I decided because we were exchanging, I think, over notes and I think over X, we were having more exchanges about this. And it was a fun exchange. And I thought, let's do a live on this sometime. The very next day, I said, let's do live now. Hurry up. I don't have a lot of time. So, Patrick, talk about yourself a little bit and what you do, what you've published, and a little bit about your Substack before we get into the conversation.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm Patrick Abbott. I live right now in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm a sci-fi writer who integrates my Catholic elements. I'm an Orthodox practicing Catholic into my works, and I use my works primarily to tell a great story because that should be the point of any storytelling, but also to explore various religious ideas and very personal ideas as well. And so I've taken elements of my time and my friends' times in Iraq and Afghanistan working with tribal affairs and also being embedded with foreign militaries and made what's known as the Fallen series. There's 3 out of the 4 books out right now, and it explores a military veteran who becomes a liaison to a mysterious, very human-like alien race that just one day shows up on Earth, and instead of invading or demanding take me to your leader, it's more, hey, what's going on? Oh, this is nice. And they don't really make clear their agenda at all. And it's up to the main character, Brendan, to explore what is going on. And so that's doing the research for that book on the fictional elements really allowed me to explore various faith traditions, not only my Catholic faith, but also other elements of the Middle East and world religions and their various thoughts on aliens. And that in turn kind of led to my Substack because every good author should have an email system to keep readers informed and also to push the books. And so on my Substack, I take a much more nonfiction approach, objectively looking at various religions and their traditions about aliens. Some are very close to the idea, some are surprisingly embracing the idea, and others, like Christianity, on the most part, are kind of open to the possibility, without closing the door or confirming it either way. And so every 2 weeks, I publish a post. Sometimes it's the Religion and Alien series, sometimes it's the short fiction, other times it's taking an objective look at the news. And my most recent post was looking at what exactly Barack Obama and Trump said about aliens and releasing files. And I believe you enjoyed that too. And it was a good look because there's so much hype right now that people on the extremes of, oh my gosh, aliens exist and the government's covering up, or people who are, this is all one giant satanic conspiracy, buy the hype and feed into the hype. And very few people actually look at the source material and take it objectively.
That's what we're going to try to do is take an objective look. My position, as you know, by the way, that was very interesting. I just barely, more barely than I realized, just barely knew about what you do on Substack. That's really, really very interesting. And before I get into the topic, so this research you did on other cultures like Afghanistan or wherever, the research you did on their perspective, their opinion, their views, culturally and I guess religiously, this went into your series?
It did. So the alien race that visits Earth, the Sabia, I borrowed a lot of both Hebrew mythology, and those who can read in between the line know where I'm going to, and also Zoroastrianism, with little bits of elements from the Islamic faith. And Islam tends to be very open about the possibility. There's even sayings in the Quran and the Hadith and other people that talk about God being the creator of worlds. And especially in some of the Hadiths, which are the sayings of Muhammad, and they're they're kind of rated on their reliability and trust.
Right.
But some of the Hadiths talks about how Muhammad's chastising people, and it's, well, obviously there's other creatures. God can't be limited. And Islam not only believes in the angelic beings, which are created creatures, as we Christians recognize in humanity, but Islam also believes in the jinn, which are basically a third
Yeah.
form of creature. And
I thought the jinn were the demonic, which is where
so
we
they're
get genies from, which in cartoons, genies are fun, fanciful, and they like to grant wishes. But really, in legend, the jinn were evil. So I thought those were
so
demons,
jinn are basically another creature in the sense that they can be evil, some can be good.
but they're not
There's
angelic. Is
They're
that what
not
you're
angelic. They're created beings of fire who live on the earth. And in fact, that there are stories about Muhammad going to the jinn and preaching Islam to the jinn, and some of the jinn accepting Islam. And in fact, when I was in Afghanistan, some tribesmen and the interpreter told me about how they used to live over there, but there was a conflict with the jinn because they would interrupt each other's space, and so the people moved, and now they get along with the jinn. And these are pious Muslims who had no problem believing there's other creatures who shouldn't be disturbed. You shouldn't really go looking for them, but they exist and they have a role in God's plan. And it's not just merely the demonic. Demons, like in Christianity, in Islam,
yeah,
are fallen angels.
yeah,
Jinn are a different
a
species.
different creature altogether. See, that's
Yes.
fascinating to me. We have to be careful because this can very easily break off into a whole different series by itself just on that. Because that sort of thing is, excuse me, is fascinating to me because there's so much, God forgive me, there, and I'm not trying to make this political or cultural, but
No,
there's
no,
so
no,
much
no.
in Islam that's just so ridiculous. But then there's that overlap between Islamic tradition and the cultures that became Muslim. You understand? The ancient, for instance, we have the flood narrative in Christianity and Judaism, of course, adopted by Muhammad, stolen by Muhammad. But there are ancient cultures that have the same or a very strikingly similar flood narrative. Likely, if you ask me, likely the same flood as it progressed through the globe. Because obviously, water didn't just appear globally out of
Mhm.
nowhere. If there was really a flood, and I believe there really was, as we see it in the scripture, it probably progressed across the globe or in various segments of the planet before the waters receded. So the flood can be found in ancient cultures passed down in oral tradition. So, with that in mind, it would be interesting to me to understand where Islam and the ancient cultures that became Muslim overlap in their views on things like the jinn, but also aliens. And jinn are not aliens as far as from what they tell, or are some of them aliens, like from
In
other
the
worlds?
sense that they're not extraterrestrial, they're not
They're not
aliens.
extraterrestrial.
Right. They're of the earth. They were created here. They belong here as much as humans. Obviously, Islam prides it on humanity. And in fact, Islam accepts old Gnostic and old, basically heterodoxal Christian stories that the reason Satan rebelled was because God commanded the angels to bow down to Adam. And so especially dealing with Islam, you have to understand that some people can rationally make the argument like Belloc did in the sense that it is a Christian heresy. So
Right,
Muhammad grew up amongst some Christians as well as pagans.
right.
Some of his family members were Christians. There's even stories about his youth that aren't scripture, but accepted in the folk tradition about how he hung out with Christian monks and got along well with them.
Hmm. Fascinating. Okay, I'm going to move us onward. from there because I could spend about an hour or two just on that. Maybe we'll have to do this again. Um,
Let's do it.
so, aliens, my position, as you know, again, as I said a moment ago, the viewer or listener may not know this. My position is aliens don't exist. And I say that with such absolute confidence, being completely open to the possibility. For instance, if aliens showed up tomorrow, you could say, T, I told you so. And I'd just say, you're right. I'm totally open to that. So when I say aliens don't exist, what I'm really saying is based on what I see in divine revelation, what I guess, observe and analyze from the perspective of logic, my opinion, informed by that material, is that it's so unlikely I have to say no. And you have a different opinion,
So
at least
my
I think,
opinion.
unless I misunderstood you.
So no, I think we're somewhat closer than what most people would recognize. In the end of the day, nobody has hard and fast evidence of yes, there's an alien right here, or no, we searched the entire galaxy. There's nothing.
Mhm.
So really, we're going under possibilities.
Right.
And my
Ultimately, right.
position, yeah, my position is a giant shrug, which I know is a great position to have. But as Abbe Monod, who in the 1800s was authorized by the Congregation of the Sacred Index to write a letter stating, there is no conflict between the faith and the possibility of alien life.
Mhm.
So it doesn't make a call whether or not there are aliens, but it does make a call that a person of goodwill could believe it or could not believe it.
Yeah.
And throughout Christianity, we have people of various opinions. But we've had Padre Pio, who thought it was a strong certainty. We have Billy Graham on the Protestant side, who thought it was basically an affirmative. We have Pope Leo XIV, who at a gathering, I believe in June or July of 2025 at the Vatican Observatory said other worlds could have alien life. So
See,
it's a
and I'm
giant
open.
shrug.
Yeah, and I'm open to the could have and could be. I remember Pope Francis once said, and people took this out of context famously when it came to Pope Francis. Pope Francis, I think, was asked, "Do you believe in aliens, or what would you do if aliens existed?" And he said, "I would baptize them," which is a perfectly reasonable thing to say. And everyone took that out of context, saying Pope Leo thinks we should find and baptize aliens. So they made him look crazy. And this was
Well,
even
it was
go ahead.
even a step back from there because he was asked about various conditions of what he would allow for a baptism. And it was more in reference to homosexual couples bringing a child to baptize or people not in a
Oh,
marriage bringing a
mhm.
child. And so he brought up the case of the Martian, not because he was asked, what about Martians?
Oh, is
He
that how it
was,
came up?
yeah, he was
Yeah, I
saying,
didn't remember that.
Look, if anybody of goodwill comes up to me and wants to be baptized," he was basically saying, to borrow another quote, who am I to say no?
Right, right. Which is the case. Which is it's early church. It's even scriptural. Um, my my thought is, and if you can in a minute, I'd like you to talk a little bit about what Padre Pio thought, because he, that's pretty authoritative. He's not crazy, or he wasn't crazy. He's a fairly modern saint, so I think people will be interested in hearing that. And I would like to hear more of it too. I remember when we first had an exchange about this, when I first wrote that article like a year ago, you had mentioned some things about Padre Pio. My thing is this: I had this conversation once with my brothers, who one has passed away. May God rest his soul. Lapsed Catholics, both, and I'm super. In my family, I'm Mister Catholic Church as far as as far as they're concerned. You know, so there's always the needling, the teasing, whatever. I can deal with that. It's what family does. And I don't remember what was in the news about aliens or UFO sighting or some bogus thing. But they said, "So what are you gonna do? What if there's aliens? Maybe there's not God." And I said, "Well, if there are aliens, as far as I'm concerned, that would just be like discovering another species of animal. It's the same thing, and that wouldn't shake my faith at all." And I still believe that. Okay, if we were visited by aliens from Mars, which is always my throwback to 1950s. I always say they're from Mars. From
War of the
Mars.
Worlds, classic movie.
classic, super. There was a lot of like Martians attacking the Earth in some of those classic movies. That one, the main one. Um, if that happened today, I would just say, okay, so God made other creatures. Now, this is going back maybe 20 years or so. My position now is the same, but here's the thing. If we're looking at aliens visiting Mars, we're not seeing animals. We're seeing intelligent creatures of such intelligence. Now, look, you can say animals have intelligence. I would say it's a little different from human intelligence, but okay, if we boil it down, animals have intelligence. But animals don't create machines. Someone said, I don't remember if it was you. I think it was on Twitter. Somebody, oh no, it was somebody else, and it was on X that animals can make tools and problem solve. Well, a stick to catch ants isn't a tool. You can call it a tool, but it's not a pair of pliers. Problem solving is different from problem building. You can observe very intelligent species of, say, primates deconstructing a trap. Okay, it's not normative, but it has been observed. Okay, have that animal build a trap, then you will impress me. So, with that in mind, if we're looking at a visitation from aliens from Mars, uh, well, how did they get here? They had to build spacecraft. If we look at some of the evidence that's out there, most of it I don't believe. One or two things that I've seen, footage, I find peculiar, but most of it I don't believe at all for various reasons. By the way, if you want to know about some of those reasons, I'll drop a link here in the on-demand version with an article and a podcast I did on the subject. Anyway, what do we see in these machines? They have design. Okay, they're not beautified, but they have design. So even if we take the ones that I don't believe are real, what we're seeing demonstrated there is design, not just building. A beaver can build a dam. He doesn't know how to design it to make it more efficient. He can fix it when it's broke, but he can't make it more efficient. He can't make it beautiful. There's no intent demonstrated in a beaver having built a dam or an ants having built, their ant farm. Okay. We see design and intent in these alleged spacecraft. So we're not just talking about intelligence as far as I see. We're talking about high intelligence. We're talking about creativity. We're talking about the image of God. Okay. We're talking about creatures who aren't just really smart. They create. They don't just build. They demonstrate intent. They make choices. They make mistakes. Some of the evidence show the spacecraft changing direction. My thing is, if those were angelic minds, they would know exactly where to go. They would calculate exactly the pursuit of the aircraft behind them. They wouldn't have to change directions. They would know where to go. So what we see there is a mistake. That means high intelligence, creative, and fallen, imperfect intellect. Now we're talking about an analog to the human race. Well, now we have to ask, are they fallen as we are? Do they need a redeemer? And so on. It introduces a lot of theological problems for me. That's one of the reasons why I used to be of the position, well, if we discovered animals, if we discovered aliens, that would just be another animal. But no, as far as I'm concerned, it isn't that simple, because what we're looking at is creative, intelligent creatures that make choices. What do you think? You can either respond to
So,
that or just offer a completely different thought. It's entirely up to you.
well, I'll get to the Padre Pio bit in a bit, but I'll take on what you said in both a theological and then kind of in a historical sort of parallel.
Okay.
So, what we have to remember is a lot of people have trouble comprehending that or accepting or even tolerating the possibility that there is other creatures made in the image of God. I get that. They forget, though, that the angelic beings potentially were made in the image of God. We have old saints like St. John of Damascus saying that. We even have St. John Paul II when he was in Los Angeles saying that. So
What
that's
did he
not,
say? Not to cut you off. That's interesting.
oh,
St. John Paul II.
so I can definitely get you the link when you're talking or afterwards. He said angels were made in the image of God. And That's not an ex cathedra statement. It's not a mandatory doctrine. But the idea that angels being rational creatures that know God and that it could be the image of God is not a new idea. It goes all the way back to the ancient church. Now, one is free to not accept that, but that's a potential possibility that saints have embraced. If the angelic beings were made in the image of God, that means the demonic ones, the fallen angels,
Could have
have
been
that image
also.
of God. And not only are they damned because of their choice when they made their choice, they're a damned creature made in the image of God who has no savior. And so that
This is
opens up. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, actually, let me just support what you're saying. First, I want to say this is just me being a teacher. We are not saying angels are made in the image of God. What Patrick is saying is that some saints have suggested that they're made in the image of God. Saint John Damascus said, an angel then is an intellectual essence ever in motion with free will. All of that is Catholic teaching with free will. Incorporeal, true. Ministering to God in the image of God. That's just a quote that I dug up in just a moment of research, but that's what we have from St. John Damascus. That's very interesting. That does open up a whole can of worms.
It does open up a whole
In
can
terms
of
of
worms.
theological exploration, is what I mean. Not in terms of it being
Mhm.
problematic. Might not be problematic. I my first reaction to that is I don't think so. I don't agree with that. But it's an interesting question to explore. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, no. And again, we are talking about theological discussions that have not been settled. People of goodwill can agree or
Right.
disagree.
Right.
And so let's say hypothetically, because I'm tend to be more skeptical of UFO claimed evidence while accepting there can be weird stuff out there.
Right.
Let's say there are aliens out there who have fallen. What would be the role of Christ or a redeemer in that situation? You have in especially the Eastern tradition, but also echoed by Pope Benedict when he was Ratzenberger and some of the stuff he written as Pope, saying Christ's death and resurrection did not just redeem humanity, but it redeemed the universe, redeemed the cosmos. In that sense,
That I agree with.
if
That I
that
agree.
was true, not only does that help save the land, help save the birds, help rectify the effect that original sin could have had, it also could mean that whatever fallen state out there, creatures, if there were, could be redeemed by Christ. And
So, oh, finish your thought.
oh no, go ahead, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. There, there's a section or a verse in Genesis that's very strong to me where God tells Adam, even the very ground is cursed because of you. And I remember I was researching the hell out of that one little bit, and there's something I think in one of the letters of Paul where he said, I think it's Paul, where he says, even I'm paraphrasing, but not loosely. Even the created order awaits the redemption of man.
Hmm.
And I linked those two, and then I was filling in the gaps between the two. What's the nature of the fall of the natural order, which includes the cosmos, I think. And I was doing this research on my iPad, and my wife needed to borrow my iPad. And my wife is terrible in that she feels it necessary to close everything. She's in the old Windows 95 mentality where you have to close all the apps, you have to close all the tabs. She closed like 4 tabs in the browser on my iPad that were really hard to find and were such juicy information, and they're gone forever. I've never been able to find them since. But
I feel your pain because the history just isn't the same. You can't just scroll through history. It's not the
it
same.
really isn't. Interesting. I wonder if I had to have checked my history and it wasn't there, but I don't know why. And in any event, they're lost to time now. But that's an interesting idea that if there are aliens on Mars, I'm going to keep going back to that old school reference. If there are aliens on
Do it.
Mars, are they part of? Well, naturally, they would be part of creation. Do they get? Do they get included in the redemption brought by the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And again, to play devil's advocate, my first thought is I don't think so, because Christ redeemed man because he took on our humanity. Well, then, again, devil's advocate in the other direction, what if aliens are just another humanity? Obviously, they'd be on a different planet, so they would have different bodies, right? They wouldn't look exactly like us. But would that still count? I don't think so, but that would be my opposition to that theory or that hypothesis. But I think it's interesting that if they are also part of creation, and if all of creation is redeemed, maybe that doesn't just mean inanimate creation. Maybe it doesn't just mean animals, which I forget what Thomas Aquinas classified animals as. There's inanimate and then sensual, I think, or sensitive. I
Yeah.
think the animals characterized as sensitive, and then man rational. Well, maybe Christ's Christ's sacrifice redeemed all of creation, including the inanimate, the sensitive, and the rational, which aliens, if they're creative, can make choices, and therefore fell and so on, maybe they would be in the same under the same umbrella as rational creation. I'm not saying that's probably so. My instinct is I don't think so, but we're just discussing. We're not trying to arrive at answers, you know?
And then we have the theological question of, okay, let's say if they're fallen, and let's say Christ's sacrifice did not redeem them, their fall was not redeemed under that. Would God still save them? And if so, how? And Thomas Paine, the famous atheist and also author of Common Sense, really pressed this point home of what? There are 10,000 Christs crucified throughout the universe? Well, the good answer to that is one, people are scandalized by Christ coming once and getting crucified.
True.
Two, both Thomas
Catholics
Aquinas,
even Catholics sometimes struggle
Mhm.
with that.
Yeah. And on the other side, both Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine, and a whole bunch of other saints wrote that Christ coming down, being incarnate, and dying on the cross was not necessary for the salvation of humanity, but it was fitting that God could have chosen any which way. God is not bound by any outside law on him, that he could have just snapped his fingers and did it, but it was most fitting and proper. So if God wanted to redeem fallen aliens, because maybe they really screwed up, or like the demons, and now they're really lost. If he wanted to redeem fallen aliens, he would have the whole toolbox in his way to save them if he chose to.
Mhm.
So the idea of, well, Christ's crucifixion, in the end, there's various ways you can argue and discuss and dialect around it about how it could affect them or not even be necessary for them. And this is where we get into Padre Pio, because Padre Pio
Oh,
in the
yes. Good,
book,
good, good that you brought that back because I forgot. Go.
I remember in the book, Padre Pio prays for us, both in the original Italian and the official English translation, which was published by his official prayer group, which was done and made by people he trusted and worked with daily to get out his messages and receive prayers. There is, amongst many pages about like the rosary, hell, just praying in general, a page about aliens. And there's two responses where people ask him, hey, are there aliens out there? And he talks about, surely there must be creatures out there. And he words it in the Italian in more of a probable sense. And the English translation uses the word probable, but it's how he believed they wouldn't have sinned. Now, he doesn't
Hmm.
claim, and nobody who knew him claimed that, oh, he had a vision of them. This is, it seems to be his personal belief,
Right.
but it shows that a person of goodwill and of such holiness as Padre Pio could have this belief.
And he said they wouldn't have sinned. I kind of remember that when you first sent this to me, but I don't remember why does he think they wouldn't have sinned?
So there's no explanation in the book, and it could be just because he thought they wouldn't have been as big as screw ups as us. But
Hmm.
that is just conjecture on my part.
I was telling somebody on X, by the way, real TJ Haines on X. If you don't know, you ought to know. You can follow me everywhere on socials at the same handle, real TJ Haines. Just real quick before I forget, just plug your socials real quick there, Patrick.
Will do. Substack is the best. So I'll
Okay,
put
I
that in
agree.
right now.
Oh, how cool. PatrickAbbott.net. Impossible to forget. And that rhymes. Just let me just take a look at this text, make sure it's not important. It's just my wife, not important. No, I'm just kidding.
If you need a place to sleep on, I have a spare couch you can for a few days.
Okay. Okay, so there's Patrick, his URL there. Now everyone's going to text me at the same time now. My favorite thing is when people have a simple thing to say and they say it across 8 text messages. I just can't. I just can't. So that's interesting. I was telling someone on X, we were going back and forth on the friendly, he's closer to your view, your opinion, and we were kind of fleshing that out. And he said, in his mind, this is where we concluded. In his mind, if they're aliens, it might be something more like they have high intelligence enough to create and so on, but so high in intelligence that they wouldn't sin. And I said, that's interesting. You basically just described Adam and Eve who sinned.
He basically described angels who we can only imagine are
Yes,
far beyond us.
exactly.
And let me
Exactly.
tell you, pride is a heck of a sin. It's
Yep.
like crack cocaine. It will make you do crazy things.
Yep. Battling it every day, usually just in my mind and heart, which is the toughest battlefield to face it. I try not to let it out into the created world. Trying to, of course, it happens, that's a tough one. Folks, if you take nothing out of this, take or nothing else out of this, take this one to the bank. Pride is a killer, and and you have to kill it before it kills you. If you want help, ask the Lord to help you and be very blunt. Lord, beat this out of me. And the Lord will, but you have to sustain the beating. Okay. If you take nothing else out of this, take that. Now, going back to so intelligent they wouldn't have sinned. And this connects to the point that we arrived at just prior, you and me. It would be interesting because he and I were doing exactly what you and I are doing. We're just discussing, talking theory and ideas. It would be interesting if maybe it's exactly what you say. They're so intelligent as to be able to create and so forth, but too intelligent to sin. Well, that basically describes Adam and Eve who sin. Wouldn't it be interesting if the aliens, if they exist, aren't fallen and they're just like us in terms of intelligence and so forth, and their first sin is the invasion of Earth? Wouldn't that be something? If they finally do fall and their first sin is the invasion of the planet Earth. I guess
And
that's just
God gave the Xylons the universe, and he said you can go to any planet except that one with problems right there.
the Cylons. Oh my goodness. Great series. Did you ever watch that? The original one?
So I
Um,
watched the original and the
Battlestar
remake,
Galactica?
which is actually the Book of Mormon in space.
Oh God, you're kidding.
No,
I didn't know that.
the 12 tribes, the wandering, and the creators were
Oh,
open
that's
about
right.
this.
That's right.
It's basically their story of how the Mormons believe some of the tribes of Israel, maybe not tribes, more refugees, left
Yeah.
Israel and ended up in the New World.
Yes, yes. And there you have Battlestar Galactica. Excellent. I love the remake. Also, I wanted to say earlier, but we got into other things. Um, some of the things that you described sound to me like 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 Battlestar Galactica, and also some of the things you got into sound like this space series by C.S. Lewis. I forget what it was called. You familiar? You must be familiar.
The space trilogy.
The space
What
trilogy. That's it.
So Out of Silent
Out of
Planet,
the
which is
Silent
about the
Planet.
voyage to Mars, where he finds not fallen alien species,
Yeah.
and he finds out that Earth is basically exiled because Satan has hostilely
Right.
taken over of it. There is Pelandria, which is basically they go to Venus, and he has to try to outdo Satan from also creating a fall amongst the Venetians.
Right.
And then there is that hideous strength, which I think, especially with the organization called NICE, it is basically the Christian better version of 1984 in the
Mhm.
sense it shows how a dystopia would work in the real world and try to turn humanity against God.
Wow. What better endorsement can you get for that book than what Patrick Abbott just gave us? That was that was
So
fantastic.
I will say a bit of Out of Silent Planet and Pellalandria influenced the religious elements of my book, which is
Yeah, I
what.
could hear it when you were talking about your series. I could hear it immediately.
So I some books are very openly on the head Christian. Left Behind, The Shack. Some people don't like it. Other people need that. That's great. I try to take a more pastoral view that on one level, it's the main characters wondering, where is God during all this as they go through their struggles of first contact and integrating with each other. On another level, it's a deeper exploration of faith of what would it mean if these very strangely human-like aliens just showed up with their own traditions and how would they view us? And so the sci-fi is a great way to explore those themes and
Mhm.
explore possibilities without saying it must be this.
Right. And not to drop a dime, but this is something that I said in the podcast, which I'll put a link to, and a link to the article, and a link to Patrick Abbott's stuff on the on-demand version. But ultimately, toward the end of the podcast, and again, this is why it's dropping a dime, because once you hear the home run, you're not going to want to watch the game. But I said, if aliens exist and invade the Earth, here's how I theologize that. Where was God during all this? Well, I think about the Old Testament when Israel turned away from God again and again and again. What was God's response to that? He allowed them to be conquered by their enemies. He allowed them, practically helped them, if you can stretch it to think of it that way.
Yeah.
They were pagans. They probably were, they worshiped false gods. Maybe some of them worshiped demons who they thought were divinities. And God allowed them to conquer Israel, his firstborn son. As I said, it would be interesting if what do you do when the whole world errs, when the whole world is wrong and there's no enemy to conquer God's chosen ones because the whole world is the problem? Maybe you bring in an enemy from a foreign planet to conquer the earth. And then at some point in human history, God enables and empowers us to overthrow them in tremendous and miraculous ways, at the end of which all of humanity says, God is real after all. We have sinned against him for generations, and it's time to set things straight. Where is the nearest Catholic church?
Well, I hope for no space Babylonian exile, but I'm glad you kind of
Too.
brought up I'm glad you brought up those references to the past because it reminds me of tackling on two times s- the actual science has challenged theological thought, but we take the science now so for granted we don't give it second thought to it. The first is St. Augustine when there was the Antipodes antipode controversy. He thought there couldn't be areas of the world not explored because he was
Could
under the
not be? Is that what you said?
could
Could
not
not be?
be that there couldn't be people there. There couldn't be unexplored people because he had the scientific knowledge of, well, you go beyond where humans are now along the greater Mediterranean and the Middle East and even a little bit to Asia. But you go to north, it gets too hot. You go to south, it gets too cold. You go either side, there's water. And so there were even anathemas about people who believed that there could be people on undiscovered parts of the world. One, because they wouldn't have heard the word of Christ, and what sort of God would allow that? Two, people thought that those barriers were so strong, there would need to be another Adam, another Eve, and that was heresy for people to be on undiscovered parts. Lo and behold, there are antipodes and there's people there.
Wow.
And we just realized, oh, our scientific models were wrong. It's not that necessarily the theology was wrong, but the science we base the practical theology on just proved not to be accurate. Everybody moved on.
Yeah.
It was great. The
Yeah.
second time was with Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas physics. That, especially when Aquinas was alive and he was pushing Aristotle hard, people thought, oh, there has to be one creation, one earth, because one is perfection, and anything beyond that is troublesome. Aquinas died in 1274, I believe. In 1277, 3 years after his death, Bishop Tempère of Paris actually came down hard and had 219 denunciations of Aristotelian physics introduced by Aquinas at the University of Paris. And he was saying, you guys are foolish for just demanding this is reality. He said, your models work, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily true, and you can't put it on the same par of faith. One of those beliefs was that the earth was at the unmoving center of the universe.
Oh,
Lo and behold, we have Copernicus and then Galileo. And
right.
that was the real controversy, that he was rocking not only Aristotelian ideas, but what people interpreted to be St. Thomas Aquinas' ideas, that if the earth isn't the center, then the whole house of cards collapse. Well,
Right.
it didn't collapse, but we adjusted our theology, practical theology, based
Right.
on the reality.
Right.
And so my thought about aliens is it could challenge some ideas about how we implement the true theology, but it
Mhm.
doesn't attack the core of the theology.
That's an important point, I think, to leave off with, because I think that's in people's minds. My thing is, if something is discovered in science or aliens, whatever, well, what are you going to do about God then? Well, we just have to understand how that fits into what we know to be the truth from divine revelation. That's all. I mean, that's not hard at all. We do that all the time. You know, that wouldn't be earth shattering, pun intended. That wouldn't be scandalizing. That would just mean there's another dimension to this that we never had to explore before. The earth or even creation is cursed because of you. Well, we sort of just passed that by. Okay, that kind of speaks for itself. Maybe we haven't had reason to explore what that means and why, and how the crucifixion of Jesus Christ comes to bear on that reality, that even I'm just making an example. Obviously, theologians and the fathers have mulled through this, but that's just an example of something that we just kind of gloss over because it's not important to us right now. Maybe it will be at some point, or maybe there are other things in divine revelation. I'm not talking about theology or patristics. I'm talking about divine revelation, official church teaching, and scripture. Maybe there's something in there that we haven't had to really explore more deeply because there was just no need to. And maybe that changes with additional scientific discovery, the appearance of aliens, which I still don't think exist. But it's just something that I think people should understand, that if Mr. Spock were to beam down to the temple, I call this the temple. If, if he were to beam down to the temple today, what does that change in it for theology? Nothing. It calls us to deepen our understanding of of theology rooted in divine revelation. It changes nothing. No reason to be scandalized or fearful of it. That's my final thought. You want to say anything, Patrick,
So
before we go?
my final thought might seem like a flip, but it's a good reminder just to keep everything centered on God and Christ. And on the flip side, while I'm open to the idea of aliens, it's very important to watch out that this belief doesn't become an idol for people, that it doesn't
For sure.
become basically occultic.
Right.
Because you have people who see lights in the sky or comprehend or think they've seen something beyond them, and therefore it must be better than them, and
Right.
therefore it must be closer to the truth or be the truth.
Right.
Christ is always the truth. And we have people who are in UFO cults. Some are genuine UFO cults, some masquerade as Christianity, yet
Hmm.
borrow heavily from the book of Enoch and think it's biblical truth. It's important always to remember to be centered on Christ and truth. And the very last thing I'll leave you with is the story of cargo cults. Are you familiar with them?
Cargo cults?
I'm
So,
about to blow your world because you're going to
okay.
go on Google Images and be, what the heck? So in World War II, we went to these islands that there were natives who knew of the outside world, but never really experienced it. We came in with
I've heard of that.
bulldozers. We bulldozed their jungles that were sacred, pristine, primal. And then we brought in planes. All of it blew their minds. Their mighty jungles were no more. Planes were coming in, things flying. And to be nice to them, we would give them some stuff. Here's a Coca-Cola. Here's a can of Spam. Blew their minds. It was literally their equivalent of aliens coming. They were Stone Age like people, and
Mhm.
people are coming in the planes and giving them free stuff. Well, the war's over and we leave, and they look around and go, What just happened? Where did it go? Our old ways can't explain that. And so you had people start religions where they would dress up as US soldiers, chop down part of the jungle, make a runway, and do drills. They made American flags. They would salute each other in the hope that cargo would come back. In the 1950s, National Geographic and anthropologists saw this, felt bad, and gave them some Coca Cola, Spam, and whatnot. And the cargo cults looked at each other and went, It's real. We just proved it. To this day, those religions exist. They
Wow.
still practice their beliefs. They still get stuff from visitors. And they still rival the dwindling traditional faiths, and they compete against Christianity. They
Wow.
even have their basic savior, John from America, that they believe came to them and told them about these great mystical truths of cargo. They might have just met somebody who said, I'm John from America, and
Right.
in their mind couldn't comprehend things and just made a whole religion around it.
Right.
That can happen to normal people if they get too obsessed about UFOs or aliens and make it the center of their life. As you said, the most important thing is battling pride. It's recenter on Christ always. This is a fun side project to look at,
Right.
but always remember God is the truth.
Right. Always remember that. That reminds me, just one last little bit. I'm John Frum. That reminds me of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, V'ger.
Yeah.
Worst movie ever made. And actually, Trolls 2 might be the worst movie ever made. The director of
Troll
Trolls 2.
Tools is enjoyable.
Oh, come on, Patrick. Come on.
Get a.
You, go ahead.
I watched it with a bunch of guys, a bunch of soft drinks, a bunch of pizzas. We couldn't stop laughing.
So, what was enjoyable was the party you had. That movie was terrible. To this day, the director swears to God it's a very, very good movie. He doesn't understand why people say it's the worst movie ever made. The second worst
And
movie ever made, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, featuring V'ger, which was actually the Voyager probe. So John Frum reminds me of that. So I want to thank everybody. There's lots of people who came into the chat room. I don't know how many people stuck around. Looks like 8, or that might just be 8 people showed up. Nobody said anything, which is totally okay. I've been saying hi to everybody as they came in so that they knew they were recognized. And thank you to those of you who watched this live. Thank you to those of you who checked it out on demand. Any final words or final goodbye, Patrick? It's on you.
so Fallen right now is 99 cents if you want to get it on Amazon for the rest of the week. Other than that, may God bless you and may this Lent be profitable in the sense you get closer to the kingdom of God.
Please, God, a little closer to sainthood. Check me out sometime at theforge.fm. Plug your Substack one last time, Patrick.
My Substack is patrickabbott.net, Patrick, Alpha Bravo Bravo, Oscar Tango Tango.net.
Yeah, that's like trying to talk to somebody at customer support and you're trying to spell your last name because they can't hear you. It's like Hotel, Apple, India.
It comes in handy.
It does come in handy. There's been the rare few times where somebody has heard me spell something on the phone, has heard me spell something out that way, and they say, "Were you in the military?" Because I guess military guys use the specific like hotel, Apple. Was it Apple? No, Alpha.
Alpha.
So like military guys will say Alpha, not Apple or Arnold. There's been
Yeah,
a rare few
regular
times.
people will say apple, baseball, cat.
Right, right. Not Bravo or Charlie and so on. So there's been a rare couple of times where someone at customer support somewhere recognized that that was a military guy on the other side of the phone. Anyway, thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you and God be with you all. Have a great Lent. Bye-bye. All right. I'm just going to end this, but I think you and I will still be connected. I don't know. If not, I'll hit you up in the chat.
Okay, we should be connected.
We'll see. I've never done this before this way with Substacks things, so I'm kind of a newbie. If not, I'll hit you up in the chat, but just to say verbally, thank you again, Patrick, for taking the time. Appreciate you, brother. End live video.